Well, hello, my friends. This is FYI Sahara YouTube, and I am Sahara, and I want to honor all my favorite Capricorn people this month of December, looking at some famous Capricorns that might just surprise you. I want to bring you the many faces of Jim Carrey. He is a Capricorn, and it's always a surprise to people since Capricorns are such serious, old humbug people. I should know. I'm a double Capricorn, and Capricorns are always pack a surprise. No matter what they appear to be on the outside, like funny man Jim Carrey, they're always serious and thoughtful on the inside. They are ruled by Saturn. Um, Saturn is the old humbug of the zodiac. And this is a quote from Jim Carrey. I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that that's not the answer. And he is, I can't even estimate what this man is worth. And let's take a look at his chart. You'll see what has motivated Carrey to do really creative projects. Once he got past the funny man clown stage of his life, he went into more serious and thoughtful things. And while we're at it, as a serious student or even a casual student of astrology, it is important to get the book called Combination of Stellar Influences by Reinhold Eberstein. He was a famous astrologer during World War II, so the language is a little antiquated, but he is brilliant. And this means is, in this title, is if you have two or three or more planets that are all interacting with each other, how do you combine the meaning of the three or even four planets? And he had a very interesting system for doing so. And if you want to understand anybody's chart, including your own, if you get this, you can understand exactly what he means by the combination of stellar influence, because astrology is a lot like minestrone soup. You add a little of this, a little bit of that, you end up with you. This is his chart here, and I wanted to break it down to the simple three most important indicators of the sun, the moon, and the ascendant to help you get your footing in understanding a chart, because it is like looking up at the sky and seeing a million stars and trying to connect the dots. That's part of life, isn't it? Looking at his chart, if you look at the first house, the second house, and the third house, you see that he has four planets, actually five planets. Oh no, six. It's like a little crowded here in the third house uh, of Gemini. What is a more Gemini personality other than Jim Carrey? Gemini is the trickster. He's the court jester of ancient times, and he is a magician. He can pull anything out of a hat. And his whole personality is very pliable, flexible, plastic. It is part of his talent. So the main thing before getting overwhelmed by all the planets, you look at the sun. That's going to tell you everything. I actually have known several Capricorns and Cancers personally that have these planets in the third house, and adding in a very serious old humbug, Mr. Capricorn conjunct Saturn of all things, and Saturn says, "Thou shalt not have." However, I think Mr. Carrey had other ideas when he came into this planet. So he is about 24 degrees of Capricorn, and the Sun is conjunct Venus and conjunct Saturn. And if you put these three things together, that's where Reinhold Everteen's book comes in handy. How do you process all of that? But first, let's look at the main indicators. This time, I'm serious. I want to achieve. I want to be a master of my art. Capricorn wants to be a master of something. If he's a farmer, he wants to do the best he can. If he's a rocket scientist, he wants to do the best he can. And he'll be very focused. That's what Capricorn does. You don't get a Capricorn down for long. They're already down. They're like in this, they walk around with a little cloud over their head. However, when you add on all these joyful aspects, you end up with something a little more lighthearted. And Gemini is that he's the clown, the Gemini, the entertainer. Uh, you want to have a great party, invite some Geminis. If you want to have a party where you want to shoot yourself first, is throw a Gemini party. If you invite 12 people, it'll be like having 24. Get 2 for 1 with the Gemini. So let's look at his moon, because we have a lot of Gemini Capricorn going on, a lot of the very serious and very playful all at once. He basically has all of his planets except for one in the west side of this chart. And that is the side of the chart that says it's all about me. Basically, I want to develop myself. I want to know about myself. But there's also these very mature combinations. This shows that he would definitely change more in the second half of his life, which he has done. You see, the first house is how you begin, your childhood. Everybody has a childhood. The second house is I'm discovering all about the cool things in this world and I want more. The third house is I want to tie it all together. I want to make it all make sense. So this is where you think about things this is where you actually become young and old. Now, let's look at the one planet on the east side of the chart, which is about other people. Here we have Gemini moon. You see, we have the Capricorn Gemini combination like crazy here, because Gemini is the most flexible. If dual, they have a problem with being superficial, but with all that Capricorn, he's serious, so he's both, and he's become kind of a philosopher in the second half of his life. Life is very serious. He has Saturn conjunct his Sun, as we saw. Mr. Sirius is tied into his personality, his Sun conjunct Venus, which is playful and loving, and loves art. Before I go back down to the Sun part of his chart in the third house, the eighth house is a very serious house, and the moon is in Gemini. And I'm going to tell you, this is a Scorpio house, when you combine Scorpio with Gemini or Virgo, any of the very mental signs, you combine Scorpio feeling with the Gemini. I want to know everything. I want to read, talk, communicate, something interesting. And Scorpio is I want to go down below the surface of things. I'm not going to remain the superficial Gemini. I want to dig below the surface. So you use your my apologies for the train. I want to use my intellect to go below the surface. Eighth house. That is actually a magic house. The eighth house is connected to sex, death, anything below the surface, psychology. I want to know more, and I don't want superficial stuff. So you have the curiosity of the Gemini combined with the I want to know what's below the surface. These people often love hypnosis, Egyptology, um, oh, Greek mythology, things like that. I want to know more. I don't want to know the surface stuff. And so you have the very, very superficial, lighthearted personality combined with the very deep and thoughtful and scorpionic personality. And it's interesting that the eighth house is also magic. I want to know the unseen. Let's go back down to the loaded third house. Everything is together here. Um, and this is, of course, the trickster, the communicator, and combined with I want to know everything about things under the surface. So this is everything: hypnosis, magic, Egyptology, mythology, psychology. Great on psychology. I'm sure Mr. Carrey is on the couch a lot, trying to delve deep into his personality. It, but you know what? What's he got going on here? He has Jupiter and Mercury. And if you look at Everteen's book, this is the great communicator. This is the great beneficent. This makes everything larger. This is like extra large, extra large mentality. And so you have the Mercury, I you know, the ruler of the third house. Um, and the ruler of his Gemini moon, I want to expand my thinking. I want to know more about. It's a largesse of thinking. I'm not going to think small. So I bet with this he's going to bounce back and forth between very serious to jovial, the comedian, and I think that's how he started out in Canada as a comedian. He was discovered by Rodney Dangerfield, and he went on from there. And these planets, Venus loves art, beauty, but Saturn's such a wet blanket mixed in with the sun. So you have such a duality of very serious humbug mixed in with the most joyful planets in the zodiac of Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus. These guys want to have a party, but don't invite Mr. Saturn. He'll be a wet blanket on everything. So this is the third house, communication. That's what is the main thing about the third house. How do you communicate? And of course, these things together have made him very wealthy. Let's look a little further into Mr. Carrey's chart. Oh, I wanted to point out midpoints a little bit. If you study Mr. Everteen's methods, he is a great proponent of midpoints, and that's a way to find out how you. It's one of the ways to find out how to combine things. The midpoint, if you were to put Saturn and Venus together, if you were to find the midpoint, you add up the two factors, add them up, and divide by 2. The midpoint is 27. So the combination of these two things together, if you were to stand right in between the two down here, you have the sun, and equals 27. So that's where you have the very serious, thoughtful, also reserved. You have this funny man who's very reserved, which is why he went on to star in Man in the Moon, a story of Andy Kaufman. I'm sure the personalities were very much alike. Man in the Moon, if you've not seen it, is I think that's his premier performance in the entertainment world. He he studied the life of Andy Kaufman, who died very young of lung cancer, and he never smoked. So Andy Kaufman was enigmatic is an understatement. He was a funny man, and he was very serious. So serious that he was destructive in his own life. So I'm sure that Carrey related very much to Andy Kaufman, the entertainer and the he could switch personalities in a heartbeat. The best performance I ever saw when I was very young was on Johnny Carson, and Andy Kaufman came out as a very dorky guy with a very strange accent, and he was basically had broken pigeon English, and he said he said he wanted to do an impersonation of Elvis Presley, which was like laughable with this dorky guy. And this is Andy Kaufman's performance on Johnny Carson, and Kaufman broke out into an insane, the best performance of Elvis you've ever seen in your life. And Andy Kaufman could do that. Right standing on stage, he turned around, combed his hair, and grabbed a guitar and did Elvis, this little dorky guy. So he was intriguing because he did very, very strange things. I mean, he did really strange things, but I won't get too much into Andy Kaufman. I think looking at his chart would be a rather heavy deal because he was a heavy-duty guy. But Jim Carrey was attracted to this guy. He was so serious, so self-defeating, and so insanely popular by the time he was 30, and enigmatic. And then he died of lung cancer, and it, nothing ever made sense with that guy. So go get this movie. You'll be really impressed with um, Carrey's interpretation of Andy Kaufman's life. So let's take a look at his ascendant. This is the amazing point in his chart. It's Neptune. Neptune is the most elusive planet. It's the planet of illusion, delusion, and confusion. Anytime you get Neptune on the ascendant, especially in Scorpio, you have a very confused person who is very likely to abuse drugs and alcohol. This is someone that is headed for Skid Row due to excesses. I had a very good friend with Neptune and Scorpio on the ascendant, and I don't think I think after the age of 12 she was drunk until she died, and she had so much talent. Um, she was an early Leo, and all the talent and beauty went right down. She just dove into a bottle and stayed there. So that is what Neptune can do. You be very confused, illusion, delusion, and confusion. But Jim Carrey turned it into the higher side of Neptune. The higher side, the higher octave is spirituality. Neptune reaches, they say Neptune came to our planet, our solar system, from another world and got caught in the sun's gravity. And so the people have a otherworldly feeling. They want to go home. They don't belong here. That's when they reach for something else always. They will become a priest, a nun, a mystic, very, very mystical. Um, and if and some form of spirituality will really add them to his personality, but often trying to escape the harshness of this world, you jump into a bottle or drugs, and that's the end of you. Which is, and Carrey has such good aspects that he was able to work in a positive way because he has. Let me get a larger chart of him. Well, I hope this comes out okay for showing you the aspects. Um, he has such a blessing here. He has the moon trine Mercury and Jupiter. You don't get better than that. That's the most positive. expansive thinking possible. These are both air signs too. Well, air house um, in Gemini, and then the Gemini moon here. So, and also this is a fixed house, so it gives him a tiny bit of grounding. So, if you think about it, let's see, he is air, a lot of air going on here, and a little in the earth. Thank God for the earthy planets in Capricorn. Uh, so these things together is I'm happy and I'm positive, I'm expansive in my thinking, and I can work with that. Anybody can. Even if in your own chart you have a transit of Jupiter to your Mercury, you're going to know it. The world, this bluebird on your shoulder right away. But the thing is, the detriment here is Neptune, illusion, confusion, and delusion is squared Mercury. That's a liar aspect. Our our current president that is about to be impeached has this aspect of Mercury squared Neptune. That's a liar. If you look any of these things up, it's textbook liar, deceiver, etc. Also, so you're dealing in illusion. So um, if you want to make people laugh, you know, you're telling them little lies all the time, funny things that make them laugh. And if they're of a different character, they got their hand in your pocket. But all the serious Capricorn in the later degree of the third house means in my later life, I am thoughtful. I want to know things on a deeper level, and so often you can't just look at this one aspect. Also, Jupiter is a planet that loves honesty. There's nothing of a higher realm as Jupiter that it makes you more refined, and I guess it's just a higher octave of everything, expansive in a positive way. Uh, so you have this kind of um, well, you're dealing from a higher level, and Neptune, of course, comes in and wants to lie, deceive. So he probably went through that a tiny bit in his early life. And he was a great strict trickster. He could make people laugh, and that brought him fame. And this is the liar. Um, and you'll see this aspect. But if you don't combine it with other planets, you can't just brand the guy as a liar. Um, and our current president, when you see this, I don't even know if Donald Trump will be the president. Probably not. Um, that's a great liar. And um, and our current president is Gemini. So it depends on, there's a lot of free will. Some things are set, this is the way it's going to be, and other things are a lot of free will. Here's an excellent start for happiness. Spontaneity. The Mayans used to look at the planet. When you're born, if you look straight up, this is in midheaven. This is, if you're lying on your back looking up at the sky, this is what's above you, in the middle of the sky, the midheaven. And the Mayans believed that that's all you needed to know. Just what's on the midheaven. That's your direction. And Uranus is like very sudden, very spontaneous, erratic, kooky, brilliant. It rules Aquarius, so that's where you get your very eccentric people that they're a little off the wall, and these are people also that walk in the room and shut down electrical equipment because Uranus rules astrology, electronics, etc. So I hope this overview of Jim Carrey's chart is helpful to you. And the story goes on. With astrology, the story never ends. A never-ending story of who you are and what you become, and that fine balance between fate and free will. And I want to bring you this very important public service announcement. Did you know that money is the root of all evil? And here is the chance to cleanse yourself in my tip jar. I need some new equipment and I just can't afford it. It's like I need about around $500 to get some my astrological programs done, and also sometimes the YouTube gets a little tricky. So my email is SaharaBrignoli@gmail.com. And if you send me an email, I can request money from you, or you can send money. It's all so easy, folks. It could be a piece of cake, and you are cleansed. And I get my equipment, and I can hopefully my mission is to bring enlightenment on a higher level, or at least a little laughter. That might be Mr. Carrey's mission, and maybe Andy Kaufman's. I wish you well. My email is at the bottom of the messages of the YouTube, as well as some links that would guide you into some more informative YouTube and public service, hopefully. So I love you all. You're my favorite people in the whole world. Anybody that tunes into an astrology lecture or to seek higher knowledge, you're on your way to evolution. And evolution is, for us all, is inevitable.